Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to introduce Professor Sridhar to all of you who will be delivering today's Samvad talk. Professor Sridhar has been with IIIT for the last 10, 12 years, and his affiliation is with Center for IT and Public Policy. He is amongst the most prolific when it comes to publishing. He has authored 3 books. The most recent one on telecom revolution in India. No, that's 2012. Then dynamics of spectrum management and emerging ICT policies and regulations. He has also edited a book, which some of us contributed to, on data-centric living, algorithms, digitization, and regulation. He has published many articles in peer-reviewed leading telecom and information systems journal. Dr. Sridhar has taught at many institutions in the USA, Finland, New Zealand, and India. He has been a member of Government of India committees on telecom and IT. He also brings in a very rich industry experience in the communications industry. I think what will catch your attention is his more than 350 articles in prominent business newspapers in the country. So he publishes at the rate of about 2 or 3 every week. And I'm sure any business newspaper you come across, Hindu Business Line, Mint, you will see something that Professor Sridhar would have authored. And using that, I think that he has been influencing the policy circle in India quite a lot. Professor Sridhar has received funding from different sources, both national and international, for his research projects. But more than anything else, I think personally, the kind of energy and the kind of positive kind of vibes Professor Sridhar exudes when you come in contact with him is something that has been fascinating. And it has been wonderful to be associated with him for so many years. We all look forward to Professor Sridhar's talk.
Thank you. Thank you, Amit. And thanks for your very generous introduction. I don't know whether I deserve it or not. But having said that, we will do some deep dive into the analysis of how radio spectrum is priced in India, worldwide, and so on. So first, I would like to give acknowledgements to who has contributed to this particular research. My co-author, Dr. Rohit Prasad, who is at the Management Development Institute in Gurgaon. We have written a number of articles and books with him. And also we have received funding for this particular work from the IIMCOE, Indian Institute of Management, Idea Telecom Center of Excellence. Also recently from ICRIER and Vodafone Idea Center for Telecom at the institute called ICRIER in Delhi. I'm also grateful to Econ, which is a UK consulting firm, which provided us with the database of all spectrum auctions were held until 2018 for fair use. And I also acknowledge Maha, who is sitting there to do a lot of data crunching for this particular presentation. So we have been having the spectrum auction for quite some time, and at least since 2010, India has been witnessing about 10 spectrum auctions. The last one, which was held earlier this year, fetched about 11,000 crores. So when we talk about these auctions, we talk about lakhs and lakhs of crores. So that is what we do. The auction is one in which the items are put on sale. And the item here is radio spectrum for commercial mobile services. And there are bidders like the mobile network operators who bid for that and then obtain it. Of course, the auctioneer, which is the government, gets a lot of money from these auctions. In fact, the money which is coming into the government exchequer has a lot of zeros, so we cannot really count. So that is the kind of money that is involved in these spectrum auctions, which are held worldwide. So this is a brief overview of all the spectrum auctions that have been held in India since 2010. So if you look at it, these are all in billions of US dollars. So for example, the last very successful auction was in 2022, where the government exchequer got about 17 billion US dollars, right? So roughly, we have received a total of about 70 billion US dollars since 2010. You can see the numbers here with a lot of zeros. That's the amount that has been accrued to the government by way of auctioning the radio mobile spectrum. So we'll come and discuss about some of these things later on. Now, spectrum is quite complex. This is a very characteristic chart which you see everywhere from the Federal Communication Commission. So, spectrum is radio waves which are used for many purposes. For example, our microwave uses it, our cordless phone uses it, and so on. Right. So there are a lot of different uses of spectrum, and the spectrum is spread from hertz to gigahertz, and now we are talking about terahertz. Right. So these are all the different kinds of spectrum which are in place. But out of these, only certain chunks are being used for commercial mobile services. The reason is that we need to have handsets and we need to have equipment which work on these spectrum. And these are standardized by standard setting bodies such as 3GPP or IEEE. And therefore, even though we see a lot of spectrum here in this particular chart, spectrum is a scarce resource, right? Because we don't have spectrum in plenty, and there are multiple use cases for each spectrum band. And therefore, only a limited amount of spectrum is available for commercial mobile communications, where the radio waves are used for communicating between the mobile handsets and the base transceiver station, which is located in the cellular tower nearby, right? Or from the cellular tower back to the mobile handsets. So this amount of spectrum, which is used for commercial mobile communication services, is always scarce. That's one of the important properties of radio spectrum. Now, the radio spectrum can be of two types. Basically, it can be licensed or unlicensed. Yes, sir.
What are the colors?
The colors are the allocation for certain specific use cases. For example, defense, aeronautics. For example, 4200 megahertz is mainly used for avionics from the in the altimeters of airplanes. So when they land, they use the 4200 megahertz spectrum in order to find out how much is the distance between the aircraft and the surface, so that they can plan to land. And therefore, we cannot really allocate 4200 megahertz to commercial mobile communication services, because the flight won't land, right? Or will land very badly. So these are all for different cases. I mean, this diagram is very messy. So it's about, I'll discuss the specific bands which are being used. So the radio spectrum is either licensed or unlicensed. For example, licensing means that because it is scarce, it has to be allocated more efficiently. And therefore, we cannot really allocate it to everyone. We have to have a method by which this allocation is done appropriately. And therefore, licensing is one of the methods. So give the license and then give the spectrum so that that spectrum will be used for this particular purposes. And that's known as license spectrum. And license means that it is for exclusive use of the spectrum to the mobile network operator to whom it has been given. It is for exclusive use. It cannot be used by anyone else, right? Whereas in the case of unlicensed spectrum, it is not for exclusive use. And therefore, the same spectrum can be used by anyone. And therefore, there is no need for licensing. And the excellent example is the 2.4 gigahertz and the 5 gigahertz spectrum that we use for Wi-Fi, right? We don't have, many people, any ISP can put in a Wi-Fi access adapter and use this particular spectrum in order to provide Wi-Fi access. It can also be used for access, that is from mobile handsets to the base transceiver station and back. It can also be used for connecting base transceiver stations across, for example, a city, right? Because in India, close to about 60% of the cellular towers are connected through microwave backhaul, because we don't have a lot of optic fiber which connects all these cellular towers together in order to make the network. So it can also be used for backhaul. The spectrum can be allocated, to a particular place, right? So for example, if I am here, I'm using 2.4 gigahertz spectrum in order to access the Wi-Fi access point, right? It can also be used in the next room for 2.4 gigahertz. And it is possible that there may be interference. For example, if you take your cellular phone near the microwave when it is operating, there can be interference, right? And therefore, we need to allocate the spectrum in specific locations. And therefore, it can be regional. That is, you divide the country into a lot of regions and then allocate it. For a large countries such as Australia, China, US, and India, these are all regionally allocated. Whereas in small countries, there is no need because Finland is just very small, and therefore the spectrum is allocated nationwide. There are a lot of methods by which the spectrum is allocated, because when you want to allocate a scarce resource, it is quite possible that there may be more people willing to buy it, but you may not have the enough spectrum available in order to give it to everyone, right? And therefore, there has to be a methodology for allocation. And the methodology for allocation is, there are a lot of different ways. In fact, India is one of the very few countries where we experimented with all types of methods, right? But preferred method for allocation of spectrum is through auction, which means that the item is put on auction, bidders bid for it, and there has to be a methodology by which this item is allocated to the winning bidder at a certain price. So what we will do in this particular talk is to look at licensed spectrum. We will spend a little bit of time in the unlicensed spectrum, but mostly licensed spectrum. We will do an in-depth analysis of the region-wise allocation of spectrum in India, because India is one of the very few countries, apart from Australia, the US, and China. China, we will forget it because we don't know exactly how the spectrum is allocated. No public information is available, so I won't talk about it. But Australia and US will talk about it. Region-wise, we'll also discuss a little bit about national auctions which are held in the European countries, and then we will we'll not talk about all the methodologies. There are very different methodologies. For example, there is a beautiful methodology called beauty parade. In item is given to the bidder who deserves it the most, not based upon the price that they bid for. For example, Finland is one of the countries which pioneered this beauty contest, right? We won't talk about it, but we'll talk about auction. And then we'll talk a little bit more about a very specific type of auction called simultaneous multiple round ascending auction, right? So that's the one which is used worldwide. So having said that, I'll just give you an overview of the kind of auctions which take place. US pioneered this auction in 1994. For the first time, Federal Communication Commission auctioned radio spectrum for commercial mobile communication services. And over a period of time, a number of auctions, a number of auctions which have taken place in the US, right? So for example, 108, which was just concluded. And you can see here that there are a lot of frequencies which are mentioned here, right? So in this auction, the frequencies are put on block for purchase, right? So we'll go into some of the details later on. But in general, this is the kind of auctions which are taking place in the US. There are some quirky auctions. For example, the recent one is Portugal. So Portugal conducted this auction over 200 days. Close to about 3/4 of an year was spent on auction, right? So these auctions can keep going, right, until it ends, right? And anyway, so it was supposed to be a national disaster because the price went through the roof in this particular auction over the 200 days in which it was held. In India, for example, there can be auctions in which the items get never sold, right? For various reasons. We'll discuss it later on. For example, in India, 2016 and 2021, a lot of spectrum in the 700 megahertz went unsold. We'll come back to that a little bit later. So these are the recent auctions which have been held. For example, comparison, Australia held in 2023, and so on and so on. Now, one thing that I want to mention is that the auctions take place on specific frequencies, right? So frequency band is the item that is put on sale. Now, this is a summary of the spectrum auctions which have been held in India from 2010 until 2024. You see here a lot of different kinds of spectrum which are put on auction. And this column indicates that there are spectrum bands which went unsold for some reason. This is of interest to us because there is an item which is put on sale and there is no bidder, or bidders are not interested, right? So we should really think about why this is the case. And then the bid prices and things like that. So a close look indicates that, these are all world, averages. We measure the price using this metric called spectrum price per megahertz per population. So that's the normal denominator normalized for comparing across countries. And you can see here that over a period of time, there has been a lot of fluctuations in the way in which the spectrum is valued. And we will come and discuss a little bit about why these fluctuations are present. And here you can see number of bidders. At one stage in 2010, there were 10 mobile network operators who were vying for auction. If you remember, there were about 14 operators. I mean, when I was telling to the FCC CTO who was here at ComsNet, he was amazed because all over the world, the mobile network is an oligopoly. Oligopoly meaning that there are only 3 to 4 operators in any part of the world. In India, had about 12, and that was not sustainable. And today we know that we have only 4 mobile operators in the country. Yeah, so we'll consider a specific auction called simultaneous multiple round ascending auction, for which the Nobel Prize in 2020. This auction design, which was basically provided by Paul Milgram, that was the he basically encouraged Federal Communication Commission in the US in 1994 to put on block the spectrum using the simultaneous multiple round ascending auction. So what is simultaneous multiple round ascending auction? So the item on sale is a spectrum band in a licensed service area. So for example, spectrum can come in various, we'll discuss a little bit about the various spectrum bands. Spectrum bands can be in 700, 800, 900, 1800, 2100, 2300, 2500, and so on, right? And there are very specific use cases for all these spectrum. Now, this spectrum, which is put on sale for a particular region, is called an item, right? And there can be simultaneous multiple round. Each item is also available in lots. For example, the lot size can be, for example, 1 megahertz, and there can be total of 5 blocks which are put on sale, and therefore you can either pick 1 or 3 or 5, right? So that's the number of lots which are available for each item. Now, this is called multiple because multiple items are put on sale. So which means that in India, there are about 22 licensed service areas, and spectrum across all bands, across all these service areas. For example, if there are 10 spectrum blocks over 22 licensed service areas, then there are about 220 items which are put on the table at the same time. Okay, so the bidders can actually bid for any of those things at any point in time. So that's why it's called as multiple. And then it is called simultaneous because the items are not sold one after the other, but the items are put on sale at the same time, simultaneously. It is multiple round because these bids can be revised by the bidders over a period of time. And it can only be ascending. That's why it's called ascending auction. So over a period of time, the prices will ascend, and then it'll attain an equilibrium state, right? Wherein all the items will be sold at that particular price, and that price is called the winning bid price. And we normalize it using winning bid price per megahertz per population as the measure by which we compare. Now, the important thing is what is the objective of the auctioneer is to maximize revenue. Even if it is a government, right? Government wants to maximize revenue from telecom auctions. That's the truth, right? Now, at the same time, the objective of any auction should be to induce truthful bidding. So which means that if I am valuing an item, I should not pay more than the value that I attach to this particular item, in which case I get a negative utility out of this, right? I should also not get that particular item well below the value that I ascribe to, in which case the item is being undersold. And therefore, I get the item, but the government does not earn its revenue at its fullest potential, right? And therefore, there is always a trade-off. Revenue, auctioneer wants to maximize the revenue, but at the same time, the methodology should induce truthful bidding. What is truthful bidding? The price that I'm willing to pay should be equal to the valuation so that my net utility is 0. And that's the break-even point at which I will price it, right? If I price it more, then I will lose. If I price it less, then it will not be sold. Somebody else will bid in favor of me, right? So it has to induce truthful bidding. Yes?
Say clock rounds, are you saying that these rounds are timed?
Time. Yeah, timed using certain criteria, right? Timed using certain criteria. Yes. It's all timed. That's why it's called as clock round. So the clock round will progress until you hit a stage, exit point at which the clock is stopped. Yes.
So they also use the second price auction?
Yeah, your point is very valid. For example, the generalized second price auction is, for example, normally you would expect that the auctioneer will hand over the item to the highest bidder at the price at which he bid, right? The highest bid price. But we can go on and argue that it does not induce truthful bidding. And therefore, what induces truthful bidding is the second price. So which means that you give it to the bidder who bid the highest, but at the second highest bid price, right? Because it induces truthful bidding. Now, simultaneous multiple round ascending auction, the way it is held, induces truthful bidding. It has been proven to induce truthful bidding, which means that it is equivalent to a second price auction, generalized second price auction. Correct. So generalized, it's correct. So generalized second price auction, in fact, does not induce truthful bidding if there is more than one item, right? Only in a single item case that it induces truthful bidding. So there is something called as adjustment, which we need to do in order to set the price. So even generalized second price auction for multiple items does not induce truthful bidding. But this is more or less like a generalized second price auction. So this gives the movement of the spectrum prices. So this is very important because if you see in the yellow dots, there's prices around 2, 1.75 and things like that. And those in the blue, it's here. And those in the green are here, right? So why are the spectrum prices so different, right? They are different because they are spectrum prices for different kinds of bands. Now, for example, broadly, we can classify the spectrum bands into sub-gigahertz bands. That is less than 1,000 megahertz. For example, 700, 800, 900 megahertz, which you normally use in most of mobiles, it is available, is a sub-gigahertz band. And there is a mid-band, which goes all the way up to 3.3 gigahertz, right? That is 1 gigahertz to 3 gigahertz. So 1800, 2100, 2300, 2500 are the most prominent bands in the mid-band. And there is a high mid-band, which is 3,300 to 4,200. That's also referred to as the C-band, right? The C-band is very much useful, especially for 5G. So most of the 5G spectrum, which is being auctioned, is all in the C-band. Then there is a millimeter wave band, that is 26 gigahertz, 40 gigahertz, high frequency spectrum. They are used for very narrow, a small area in which it can be used. Now you will understand why the spectrum prices are so different across the different bands. Now, this is the propagation characteristics of the different kinds of bands, starting with 700 all the way up to 2600. 26 gigahertz will be much, much less than this, right? So, for example, 700 megahertz can cover a very large area, right? It has excellent propagation characteristics. It can penetrate walls, right? Because it's low frequency. And therefore, it is ideal for rural and remote areas inside building coverage, right? I just wrote with Mahadevan an article recently. The reason why we have very poor indoor coverage in India is that none of our operators have enough sub-gigahertz band, right? That's one of the important areas, right? But when you go higher and higher frequencies, the propagation characteristics become poor. In building coverage is very poor. The area coverage from a cell tower or a BTS is very less, and therefore you need to deploy more towers in order to cover a particular area, right? So the bidders, the mobile network operators, always weigh in how much they have to pay for spectrum vis-a-vis how much of towers that they need to install in order to do the coverage, right? So, for example, if there's 700 megahertz band, you need very, very less number of towers because of its superior propagation characteristics, and therefore, they will not deploy that much of cellular towers, right? And therefore, the amount that they are willing to pay, and hence the auctioneer should have in mind, is the high prices for the sub-gigahertz. Whereas if you go to the high frequency band, like that has excellent bandwidth, but at the same time, propagation characteristics are very poor. And therefore, they are microcells, and you have to deploy many number of cells. And therefore, the cost of infrastructure for the MNO is very high, and therefore, they would like to pay only small amount for the high frequency. If you look at the 22 spectrum auction, 700 megahertz was sold on the average $0.32 per megahertz per population, whereas 26 gigahertz was sold at 0.0012, roughly of 0.1 cent, right? So that indicates, how the mobile network operators will trade in the amount that they want to pay for the spectrum versus the amount of infrastructure that they have to put in. So this is a brief country snapshot. So you look at The C-band is one of the most widely used spectrum band for 5G, especially for connecting private networks and so on. That's roughly 3,300 to 4,200 megahertz. The winning bid prices worldwide are somewhere around here, right? It's about $0.05 per megahertz per population. And this is a snapshot of India prices. We'll come back later on. This is 700 megahertz worldwide. So if you look at 700 megahertz, roughly the median price is somewhere here at about $0.27 per megahertz or per pop. So as you can see, there is a wide variation in terms of prices of the 700 megahertz compared to, for example, the 3.3 gigahertz, right? Because of the point that I discussed earlier. Now, we have a lot of licensed service areas. So we have 22 licensed service areas in the country, right? So we have 3 metros, Delhi, Mumbai, and Calcutta. And then we have really classified them into category A, B, and C, right? So for example, category A includes Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and so on. Category B includes Madhya Pradesh, West Bengal, Rajasthan, Haryana, and so on. And then category C, which includes Seven Sisters, in the Northeast, and then you have Odisha, Bihar, Jammu and Kashmir, right? There is, don't ask me why and how, whether it has to change or not, but we'll come back to that. But generally, we have 22 licensed service areas, and you can see that the spectrum prices, both for the C band as well as 700 megahertz band, widely vary, right? In general, Delhi, Mumbai, and Kolkata go through the roof, right? The winning prices are very, very high, especially in Delhi, after that Mumbai, and then after that Kolkata. Almost all the category A circles have a winning bid price, which is much, much higher than the average. And then you come the category B and category C circles, which are sold at relatively lower prices. So what we have done is to build this very simple model, and we have to position our work. Our work is basically, we are not working on mechanism design, because mechanism design is done and dusted. They've got Nobel Prize. There is no reason why we have to really do that. So we use only simultaneous multiple round ascending auction, which has been used almost worldwide. But of course, there are a lot of nuances which have been done. There's something called as enhanced simultaneous multiple round ascending auction, packaged auction, and so on, which are only used in the US, right? We'll come and discuss about that specific case later on. But in general, we use simultaneous multiple round ascending auction. Country specific, there are a lot of studies that have been done on US auctions, European auctions, cross-country studies which have been done. And our objective is to look at India auctions. Now, we use only learning, statistical learning, and not AML. Professor Raghavan is here. So we'll use simple regression models. Yeah. This one? Yeah.
You see that the metros, the cost, price per megahertz
Correct.
The area it is serving is very small.
Correct.
So that means apart from the millimeter wave is best suited for that, right?
Yes, you're absolutely correct.
But still, isn't an alternative required? But still, the cost per megahertz per capita for the millimeter wave is too less.
Correct.
These two are
correct. So it is not as high as you would expect for a 700 megahertz. See, if an operator gets 700 megahertz, even in the for example, metro area, it is good for them. It is good. They would like to put more money into the lower frequency spectrum than putting it on a high frequency spectrum, even though high frequency spectrum can be used very effectively in a dense urban area. Correct. So for example, I think this is the 3300 megahertz, right? This is the C band, and you can see that this is much, much higher in the metros compared to, for example, any other licensed service area. Right? But relatively, that price is less compared to a 700 megahertz because of this poor propagation characteristics. It cannot really touch the 700 megahertz price, but there will be a lot of variations. And of course, the network operator will want to buy more in the metro areas compared to, for example, the other licensed service areas, which are states, mostly states. Okay. So the model that we use is very, very simple, very simple. So basically, we use Yeah, so we use a simple regression model. We also use, for example, fixed effect model, which basically takes into consideration the effect of different variables. We fix auction methodology, which is simultaneous multiple round ascending auction. There are a lot of factors which will determine the spectrum price, the winning bid price. One of the important characteristic is the reserve price that is set at the top, right? So what is reserve price? Reserve price is the starting clock round price. That means that for every item that is a spectrum in a particular license service area, the initial clock round price is set, right? And every bidder has to quote either greater than or equal to the clock round price. Otherwise, they are not eligible to participate, right? So this is the minimum bid price for any item, and that is the reserve price. Then, so obviously you would hypothesize that higher the reserve price, higher should be the winning bid price, because at least it should be equal to the reserve price, and therefore it should be higher, right? The second one is available spectrum in the auction. So every time you see in the previous slide, we put a lot of spectrum bands on auction. So this basically takes into account the supply side effect, which means that if you have a lot of spectrum to be sold, obviously the bidders can have a lot of things to choose from, and therefore you would expect the winning bid price to be lower if you have a very large amount of spectrum to be put on the auction. License duration. So normally these license durations are limited. And for example, in India, it's about 20 years. Moreover, in worldwide, it's about 15 to 20 years. The larger the amount of license period, the bidder will have clear visibility, and therefore they will be willing to pay more, right? Compared to, for example, you auction it for 1 year, right? And that is the hypothesis. Number of bidders basically is indicative of competition. As you've seen before, in 2010, there were 10 bidders. Today, it has come to 3 bidders, right? You can always ask the question whether they will collude or not. Right? So in general, simultaneous multiple round ascending auction minimizes collusion through its methodology, right? There are various nuances to the methodology, but in general, the number of bidders are higher. You expect the winning bid price to be higher. Low frequency band, as we mentioned before, the lower frequency band tends to have a higher winning bid price, right? And therefore, we use some dummy in order to indicate what frequency band that we are auctioning the item. That's about supply side, and you have demand side. Demand side is very difficult to guess. The only thing that we can possibly do is that if the population covered is larger, then demand for broadband will be more, and therefore the mobile network operator will be willing to get spectrum at a higher price, right? So that is one of the things. Of course, income, we did not do it in this. Right, we did it. If the income is more, then people are willing to spend more, and therefore you expect the winning bid price for the operator for an item to be more. So, this is a very simple model, and this population, available spectrum, number of bidders, reserve price, sub-gigahertz, and so on. So IJT, I refers to the item which is put on sale, a particular license band. And then J refers to the J refers to the license service area in which it is put into auction. So, and T refers to the time period in which it is put into auction. So we do simple panel data analysis. It's a panel data, as you can see, right? Of time, we have cross-sectional data across license service areas over spectrum bands, and therefore it's a good panel data. And therefore we do some kind of panel data analysis, OLS, and then also fixed effect model. Fixed effect models are very useful in this particular case because it's a panel data, and therefore we use something called as dummy variable approach in order to detect if there are any differences due to specificity of the particular license service area, or it is because, right? So we use kinds of fixed effect models. That is area-specific fixed effect model, specific fixed effect model, and also a combination of year plus the license service area fixed effect model in order to find out using that. So we use something called as least square dummy variable approach. It's basically you create a dummy for country, dummy for year, and then you do the regression, in which case you will have specific coefficients for each year as well as for the license service area to account for the variations in the license service area as well as the years. So generally, you see here This is the analysis of the national auction, which have been held. Most of the variables seem to have significant effect. But one thing that I want to point out is the reserve price, right? So if you see here, reserve price has a positive correlation with the winning bid price. In fact, for every $1 increase in the reserve price, the winning bid price per megahertz per pop is going to increase by about 1.25. So which means that when you keep on increasing the reserve price, the winning bid price also increases, right? And yes, please.
So what exactly are you trying to model? You're trying to
Model this. The price,
final bid price.
final winning bid price. Winning bid price is a function of this.
As a function.
As a function of this. As a function of this. So, these are all, this is pooled OLS, and these are fixed effect models. And if you see here, roughly the reserve price per megahertz is a very strong association with the winning bid price, right? A dummy for the sub megahertz. This is the dummy for sub gigahertz band. So we use a dummy of 1 for the sub gigahertz band. As you can see here, there is a positive effect. So if you are auctioning a sub gigahertz band, it is expected to increase the winning bid price by that much, something like that, right? Number of bidders have a positive impact. As we discussed before, competition increases. And available spectrum, if you keep on increasing the available spectrum, it is supposed to have a negative effect on the winning bid price because of the supply side constraints. Now, these are analysis of the US auctions which were held. US will come and spend a little bit of time later on about the particular US US allocation models, but they also use most of the time simultaneous multiple round ascending auction. Again, the important thing is that the reserve price always has a positive effect on the winning bid price. So reserve price is one of the important factors that affect the winning bid price. That's the message that I want to give you, and also available spectrum and so on. So this is Australia. The reason why Australia is interesting is that Australia is also a large country like ours, and much like the US, they also use regional auctions because it's a very large country, right? If you take any of the European countries, they're all national auctions because they're all. So even if you look at Australia, right, a reserve price per megahertz per population still has a lot of significance on the winning bid price. And there are some quirkies, we need to work on it a little bit more. But in general, the spectrum available is more, then your winning bid price reduces, number of bidders increase, then winning bid price increases. So most of the hypotheses seem to sort of hold true in auctions which are held in India, auctions which are done worldwide, which are done in specific countries such as the US or Australia, right? So what? Now the important question is, so what, right? So there has to be some kind of discussions, right? Now, so reserve price is very important, right? So the starting bid price at the initial clock round is very, very important. It has to be set appropriately, right? But it's very difficult to set it appropriately. The reason is, if the reserve price is set very high, then it is quite possible that none of the items will be sold, right? This is a configuration parameter by the auctioneer. And if it is set very low, then it can be sold at very cheap price, right? And there'll be a lot of political backlash on, giving a scarce spectrum for free kind of thing, right? And therefore, it is very important to find out where to set the reserve price, right? So in India, I'll just discuss it a little bit more. In India, the reserve prices have always been higher. Okay, I'll tell you why it is so. The second thing is that we have to make more spectrum available, right? But as we discussed in the FCC, there are multiple use cases for spectrum, right? So spectrum can be used. For example, satellites can be used for television broadcasting, for the DTH that you see direct to home. It uses KU and KA band. But the same KU and KA band is also being asked for by the satellite operators, right? So there are multiple use cases, and therefore the government has to find out which one and how much to allocate for commercial mobile services. And then we need to have adequate competition, right? We had a lot of competition at one point in time. Now it is down to 3, right? In fact, BSNL and TNL do not participate in the auction because they are state-owned enterprises. They pay the price which has been discovered in the auction, but they never participate in the auction. So there are only three. And you can ask that these three guys are going to collude and then make some this thing, right? Killing out of. Yeah. Okay. So reserve price. So it's a policy dilemma, right? You've sold high revenue for the, it has to be set appropriately. And what we have, one of the methods is not really a very important one of the widely used methods is to look at prior auctions and then set the reserve price accordingly, right? Now, in India, the reserve price is set based upon the winning bid price in the previous auction, right? So which means that every time there is an auction, there is a winning bid price which is discovered for an item, and that becomes the basic minimum first round clock price at the next auction by a margin, right? It is increased by a margin, right? And therefore, this is the method that we follow, and therefore, we never see a reserve price decline in the last 10 years on any of the items that were put on sold, right? So which means that reserve price keeps going, and unless the bidders really realize that the value is worth it, they won't bid it, right? So that is one of the big problems in India. The second thing is, if you look at the operators holding, spectrum holding by the operators, we have 4 operators here, and you see here, most of the spectrum is held by Bharti, Reliance, of course, BSNL, and a little bit by Vodafone, and there are operators like Adani who have some specific bands. Yes, sir, please.
Bid price going up.
Yeah.
Why doesn't that translate into the rates we pay for our mobile service?
Good point, sir. So,
we see opposite trend. You're saying the bid price is going up.
Yeah.
Then the mobile rates are.
So there are two arguments. One is the amount that the operators pay for spectrum is considered as a sunk and fixed cost, in which case the price that you pay on the marginal cost, which is the extra cost that you input megabyte, not based upon the sunk cost. So based upon marginal cost and not based upon fixed cost. And therefore that is considered as sunk and sold, right?
That has been recovered somehow.
Correct,
right?
correct. So,
I get that wrong.
sir,
You give the answer that I like.
okay. The second thing is that, of course, there are, reasons why, for example, we saw a steep decline in 2016 in the price of mobile services because of the entrance of Reliance Jio, right? Now, people have argued, there has been a case which have been put by Bharti Airtel saying that, they are using something called as a predatory pricing. If the price is below the average cost, then you are actually losing. And therefore, that price is predatory, because you can actually kill competition because of that price. But that did not go through and so on, right? But it is expected that all the mobile operators are going to increase the price from now onwards in order to sustain themselves. But over a period of time, it will increase. It will definitely. Yes, sir. You are.
That's what we have not discussed. But very big has two parts. But one part is there is spectrum. Another part is that for that time, technology is improving. So what is for which you are paying money? You are paying money in that time. How much of time I use the spectrum? If I increase the rate, that means my what spectrum is reduced. Say 1 second, 1 minute, half a second, 1 second. What is that? That means she's silent, increasing. So you are using the time less and less to transmit the information. That means your cost is also coming down according to the use of the latest technology.
Correct. So absolutely correct. So as director mentioned, actually, Professor Jyotsna had given that is the number of bits that we can encode in per gigahertz. It has been good. It is optimally used. So if you thank you very much. So if you look at the spectrum holding, see, roughly our operators hold about 1,000 megahertz of spectrum, which is actually higher than average, just one higher than average. So you'll see that, oh, this spectrum is being hoarded. All the spectrum is being given to these operators, and they are not using it to the fullest extent, because 1,000 megahertz is quite high for an operator worldwide. If you compare worldwide, it is above average. But if you look at it very carefully, most of the spectrum holding is in the millimeter wave band, 26 gigahertz band. The sub gigahertz and also the mid band, which is very much required in India. India, the coverage, I mean, it is a large country, right? For example, you take UP is UP West, Rajasthan, MP, huge states, right? So we have a lot of areas which need to be covered, and therefore the spectrum holding, especially in the sub gigahertz band, is very poor with the Indian operators. That's one of the reasons why you have always call drops inside buildings. Yeah, please.
So are these time limited for the use of that spectrum?
Yes, it's time limited by a license period, which is 20 years. Yeah.
Is there a limit how much you can bid for?
No, there is no limit. I mean, of course, there is a limit. Absolutely. There is a limit, right? So, for example, no operator in the country than 50% of spectrum holding in a particular band, right? So, for amount allocated is 25. Nobody can have more than 50%, 12.5 megahertz in that particular band. Not more than 25% overall. The overall allocation, no operator can have. Am I saying 25%? This guy is 28.24%. So these guys cannot really bid in the next auction unless they give up something, right? So this is to promote competition. This is to promote competition. But now the competition is just between 3 or 4, right? Yeah.
How is it? What is their tax?
Yeah, so good point. So it's capital, but the thing is, there are two ways by which this spectrum that is winning bid price can be paid by the operators. One is upfront payment, or it can be over a period of 10 years with the interest for every year accounted for. So most of the operators pay the first tranche, second year they're free from payment. From third year onwards up to the 10th year they pay, including interest. And that is shown as asset. You're correct. That's shown as an asset in the balance sheet. It is not depreciable, right? So because that's one of the reasons why, for example, most of the banks, if, for example, Vodafone Idea is bankrupt, right? So the banks are saying, give me the spectrum, right? Because that's an asset. So it's not depreciated.
The 25% will be set by TRAI, right?
Yes, by the regulator. By the regulator. Yeah, Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, antitrust. Correct. Yeah. To make sure that there is enough competition in the market, right? So unlicensed band. So see, we've only discussed about licensed band, right? But unlicensed band can really complement the licensed services, right? So for example, we have been having this 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, and all those things, but 6 gigahertz is very, very important. There is 1200 megahertz of 6 gigahertz spectrum, which has been standardized for Wi-Fi 6E, right? So which can complement. So you can increase the coverage using unlicensed band, and therefore, whenever someone moves from macro cell to a room, then it will be handed off to the Wi-Fi, right? So there is good as a complement. Yes. Yeah.
One is very, very limited.
Correct.
Why is the policy decision in telecom those are not made widely available, or the operators are not?
No. So
one.
Yeah.
Then the second question is going to settle from the regression.
Yeah.
Factors that come up.
Yeah.
Primarily things like the reserve price.
Correct.
Etc. So I'm just wondering, this could possibly apply, or I mean, can you verify whether this applies to any common pool goods, not just spectrum? Not just
yeah, anything which is scarce.
common pool resource.
Correct. The common pool resource, anything which is scarce, I think that it holds good. Yeah, my guess is that it holds good, right? So I haven't shown you that previous slide. I mean, it will take a lot of time to go to that particular table. But if you look at sub gigahertz band, the reason why sub gigahertz band is very few, very low amount with the operator is that if you look at, it was put on auction in 2016, nobody picked up because of the high reserve price, right? In 2022, only one operator picked up 10 megahertz and it at reserve price. 15 megahertz were left unsold, right? It's only because of the reserve price that it was not picked up. And sub gigahertz are normally priced higher and it keeps increasing. The reserve price keeps increasing.
policy point of view, they should actually lower.
Yes, yes.
We want-
I've been writing thousands of articles on this, right? But the important thing is Supreme Court in 2012 have made a decision to say that all the spectrum auctions, all these, spectrum should be auctioned. It can never be administratively given, and it should be in the interest of the nation at large, right? And therefore, the formula which they came up at that time was to have a proportional increase over the winning bid price in the last auction. And that is very difficult to change. Very, very difficult to say that it should reduce. It can never happen. Yeah. So that is one of the reasons. The winning bid price, the reserve bid price, it's politically very sensitive subject on this. And we have not been able to change it. Okay, so just a quick one. We have about 5 minutes. Sorry. No. Reserve, yeah. For example, 700 megahertz is
The other graph that you showed.
Yeah.
There are
metros. Metros normally the reserve price is also higher.
right.
Yeah.
So even but for the others, it's your baseline is actually very small, right?
Correct. The winning bid price. I showed whatever I showed was winning bid price, and we can look at it. But most of the times, the winning bid price in India, the winning bid price is equal to the reserve price. Most of the items, except in the very few auctions, that the winning bid price was significantly greater than the reserve price. The reason is that reserve price itself was high, and therefore the winning bid price just saturates at the reserve price. And that's the answer to your question. So all the reserve prices for any item is different, could be different. An item here is spectrum on sale in a particular region. So same 700 megahertz, reserve price in MP will be much, much lower compared to Delhi. Unlicensed spectrum. So unlicensed spectrum, the important thing is that should we license or unlicensed, right? Now, there is this cat and mouse. Where is the cat and mouse? It's not there. There is a cat and mouse game, which is always played, right? Unlicensed band. Who want unlicensed band? All the internet companies like Facebook, Meta, Google, they don't want to be operators, right? They don't want to participate in the auction. They want to provide internet services using unlicensed band, right? Whereas all the mobile network operators want to have exclusive spectrum. And therefore, they want licensing, right? So there is always this battle, and therefore 6 gigahertz is a golden, it's a very good band because it can be used because it is standardized in IEEE, Wi-Fi 6E, and therefore it can be used for Wi-Fi. But the mobile network operators also want that because they can provide fixed wireless access service, right? Because it's very, high frequency, and therefore they can actually put fixed wireless access. And a lot of countries have made conscious decision to, for example, unlicense. Right? A lot of countries in the US did it, UK, a lot of countries did it. And some countries have made it partially licensed. For example, in the World Radio Communication Conference earlier this year, they said that the lower 600 megahertz can be used for Wi-Fi, and the higher 600 megahertz can be auctioned for mobile network operators. India has not made any decision. The National Frequency Allocation Plan does not indicate anything, but I'm really voting for de-licensing this, right? Because if you de-license this, then it becomes, Wi-Fi 6E can be made available and can definitely complement as a, complement the cellular network, right? So that is one. The other important band is the V band, which is 60 gigahertz band. So we have been using this. This is a very high frequency band. We have been using this for microwave backhaul, that is connecting the BTS, right? Across BTS, we use a microwave V band for this. But this 60 gigahertz is also been standardized by IEEE 802.11 AY and AD for Y gig, right? If you know, Y gig operates on 60 gigahertz as well. So which means that you can run a Wi-Fi at gigabit speed using 60 gigahertz. But again, there is a problem, right? The mobile network operators want it to be licensed, and the internet companies want it for unlicensed use. And therefore, we have not made any decision so far, but countries have made various decisions, including fully de-licensing the band or separate out 7 gigahertz for licensing and unlicensing, partial de-licensing. So I'm also for de-licensing this band, because then we can actually use it for Y gig and high-speed Wi-Fi access. So all these things can actually complement the cellular network, but very important decision for the policymakers to make. If they de-license, then there is no revenue, right? Because it is de-licensed, and therefore there is every incentive for the mobile network operators to lobby the government for license use. So then there are satellite operations, right? So for example, you have Kuiper by Amazon, SpaceX by Elon Musk, Elon Musk, Starlink, and then Airtel is part of OneWeb, and you have Argeo, which is part of O3B, and so on. These are all low Earth orbit satellites, right? If you the satellite to 600, 700 kilometers above the Earth's surface, with multiple constellations, it's possible to cover the Earth, right? And therefore, it is complement or substitute, can potentially substitute mobile services, right? And the frequency that is sought is all in the K band, so pursued by the mobile network operators. In fact, KU and KA band, we are already using it for direct home. If you have any direct home antennas, you use KU and KU band, right? Now, satellite operators want this. Mobile network operators do not want to give, right? So these people want it to be auctioned, because this is going to substitute my cellular service, and therefore it has to be auctioned much the same way as the other bands. Whereas cellular operators say that it's always never auctioned, because can be shared, and therefore it should be administrative price. So this war is going on.
Happened. And there were literally nobody to purchase any bands beyond 2.5 gigahertz.
Correct.
Why would someone buy 10 gigahertz or 9 gigahertz?
Correct. So your point is very valid, right? Now, you can always argue that, high frequency, as I've told, spectrum holding by operators, especially the high frequency band, is quite high. It's sufficient for just a lot of things in the 3.3 gigahertz, C band, and 26 gigahertz, and the 22. One of the reasons why in the 2024 auction, nobody picked up anything, right? The most important band for all of them is sub-gigahertz and mid-band, right? Question, but it is again, right? Because nobody wants to give footage for the satellite operators to substitute the regular mobile services. And important thing, very, very important, right? So we have licensed service areas, which are very large. For example, Karnataka as a whole is licensed service area. But when 5G, 26 gigahertz, so 3.3 gigahertz band, you don't plan to cover each and every nook and part of the licensed service area, right? We want to provide service in cities, for example. So this requires a whole reorientation of the licensed service area in India. So we have to go beyond this 22 licensed service areas, and we have to look at cities, for example, much like FM. In FM, you gave a spectrum for FM stations in a particular city. And that's what we want to do for cellular mobile services also. The reason is that in the US, there are 734 cellular market areas. And an item is put into auction in 734 cellular mobile areas at a time, right? You can see the way in which it is coordinated, but it requires a lot of coordination, right? So which means that we have to have a lot of methods by which the spectrum is allocated if we want to do it in a microcellular area. So I'm almost coming to an end. So this this work has been going on for quite some time, and now the countries are also opting for much complicated auction mechanisms, including packaged auction. So which means that you can not only buy one item, but you can combine the items into a package, and you bid for the package, right? If you get the package or not. And there can be, it's a combinatorial problem, right? So you have n items, you can come up with any number of, n factorial kind of, I don't know, number of packages. And therefore, it is quite complex. But it is being held in the US for quite some time. And 5G auctions are still in progress, or data set is a little bit not full. And we have also not explicitly considered the complementarity of Wi-Fi. So which means that if you know exactly how much of Wi-Fi band is available across the country, then we can actually use that as a parameter to include in the model, but the data sets are limited. Sir, yes, sir. Yeah.
Top one what you mentioned, I think the nuclear
Huh. Huh.
is possible.
Huh.
It comes with license or unlicensed.
Huh.
Sorry. Which impact on the business?
Yes, yes. Yes, absolutely, sir. So the reason, I mean, your question also, why, for example, 26 gigahertz are not being bought? It's not much use, right? It is used only in certain, very dense urban areas, and they already have the spectrum from 22 auction. So in order to motivate you to buy it, I have to have a licensed service area, which is very small in number, and I pay less because it covers only lesser area. Right? So the whole model has to be revisited. We have been arguing for quite some time, but still will sometime it will be heard, I think. So your point is very valid, sir. We need to look at cities, especially for 26 gigahertz and 3.3 gigahertz. Yeah. Yes. I think so.
Tell you, what is the government's business in this work? Is it actually providing some infrastructure? What not do this in the
Manage balance of payments. No, see, I mean, every country wants to, because it's a scarce resource, right?
What is the government thinking? I can understand that whole thought.
It is the exclusive use of the spectrum.
But what is it thinking?
No, exclusive use of the spectrum to provide mobile services. Okay, so that is a different matter altogether. For example, the revenue that is accrued through the auction, right? How will you use it, right? That's a different matter altogether. Okay. No. It is for no. Okay. So it goes. All the auction proceeds go to what is called as Consolidated Fund of India to provide education, healthcare, and things like that for us. It's a common purpose.
But then
No. Auction.
Because it's a that's why it's a common.
It is owned by the state. Radio spectrum in this place is owned by the state, right? So, so part of this work is included in a chapter in our forthcoming book. Hopefully, it will come. P25 Oxford University Press. So that's under preparation and under review. Hopefully, it will be accepted, and all the other things are there. Yeah. Tahir.
Doesn't the government have the regulation?
Yes.
Because
yes.
The main issue is that in the smaller countries where the same bands are
correct
auctioned.
Yes.
When there are more telecom companies who are not trusted, that's what causes insecurity in the government.
Correct.
So the role of the government should be to make sure that people who are participating in the auction are trusted.
Correct.
That's one of the
Correct. So I mean, the thing is that you have a scarce resource, which is a state property, and I have to allocate it, and there are millions of people who want it, and therefore there has to be a method for allocation, and that's the only method which is proven to be true, right? So that's the method. The only exception, being Finland and some of the Nordic countries, right? So the Nordic countries for a long time, they never auctioned spectrum. They always sold it by beauty contest, right? I mean, that is to promote, for example, Nokia and Ericsson, so that they can do a test bed in 5G, 6G without incurring much of the cost with the network operators. So except for the Nordic countries, almost all countries have to use some mechanism like this in order to allocate the scarce resource to multiple parties. Yes.
CIAT 2.7. So has this SMRA?
No, before 2010, we did not use SMRA. We used something called as fixed price model. The 2004 was an auction which was called as golden auction, and we fixed the price for all the spectrum which was given from there until 2008, and that formed that whole thing episode. So we did not use, only from 2010 onwards, after the Supreme Court verdict, that we have started using simultaneous. Yes.
Does the government monetize spectrum by unlicensed? Because you have an option.
Oh, it is not an option. License or unlicensed. It's not an option.
Now, the government is trying to decide.
Right.
One side is monetization, other side is giving
Correct.
it for free.
Correct.
What do you think is going to win?
So they will do a half-half. My thing is very clear. So they'll do 6 gigahertz. They will, go by the WRC recommendation, because WRC is also quite influenced by the mobile network. So 600 megahertz they will license. I mean, do it on auction, and 600 megahertz they will unlicense.
What about radio compatibility?
Radio compatibility? Is that what you're saying? Huge problem, right? So for example, the bands are very unique. For example, 1900 megahertz, which is not supported by any of the phones here, is widely used band in the US, right? So some of the bands, 1700 megahertz, which has been auctioned, 2.5 gigahertz. So there are standards which have been promoted by 3GPP, but we belong to different ITU regions, right? So ITU region, India belongs to Australia and Southeast Asia. We all form one region. North America's form one region. So they can pick up any of these depending upon how and when they can release that spectrum, because there are multiple uses of the spectrum. So that is a problem. That's a problem that will continue to exist. Yeah.
Now the discussion is about allocation.
Correct.
The past guy has allocated E-band as well.
Correct.
So if at all this satellite spectrum is going to be administrated, what will be the formula to reach to the prices? What will be the...
See, I really don't know, because in the case of microwave backhaul, you know the distance and you can actually do an administrative pricing. Whereas in the case of satellite, very difficult to estimate the distance-based method to do it. So one of the methods which is proposed is, again, basically go and do some calculations for the spectrum based upon the spectrum prices that we have discovered in the 700, 800. Though it is administrative, but it may be a fixed price, high price, too high price. May not be auction, but it may be a fixed price.
What are the factors that may skew the desire to go either auction or administrative towards administrative? For something like SATCOM, we've seen
Correct.
increased use of
Correct.
Starlink,
Correct.
Geo and Antel
Correct.
proposing
Correct.
what the government concluded. or
Correct.
Making it administrative.
Correct.
What would make it administrative? Like why should we have it?
So the
Why
reason,
is something like that required?
right. So if it is for exclusive use, then people will say auction it. If it is non-exclusive, it can potentially be shared. Then they will say that you have to do administrative pricing. Satellite spectrum is can be shared across many operators. Same band can be shared across many operators using polarization and things like that. So that is one of the reasons why they are vying for administrative pricing. That's a short answer. So I think I'm exceeding the time.
So first, let's thank Professor Sridhar for this talk. Thank you all, and thank you, Professor Amit, for chairing the session, and thanks all the audience for interactive participation.